I'm on staff with Specified Collections Consortium. Theresa Miller is with us, and our director, Jim Beach, is also here. And there's Andy Bentley is still with us as well. So I feel like we should just introduce ourselves a bit, even though it looks like many of those attending were with us for the earlier symposium and probably already very familiar with the fact that for the past 30 years, we have been programming a databases for biological collections management. We were NSF grant funded for most of that time. And a few years ago, we're asked to become more sustainable with our funding. So we looked back into our mission and really saw that it had always been to support the community. We started before we even programmed our software by visiting the collections management community and watching what was done in the collections themselves. And then we created much of what you see in the software, all of it actually, to support collections management. We decided at that time to make it open source. It's customizable. We added loans and gifts, labels and reports. We even went out and outside of the program, created an attachment server and a web portal so that collections could share their data. We created an exporter, and recently Specify 7 is a web application, and knowing that not all collections had IT support, we now also offer hosting on the cloud. So it made sense to us to create a membership consortium, and on July 1st, we will be venturing into our 3rd year with that. We have 77 member institutions and 202 collections that are part of the consortium. We feel that it has been a really wonderful way to bring the community closer to the project and giving them more authority in the software itself. We have set up a governance of a board of members, and we have both a science and technology committee that advises the board and advises us as well as we make decisions for the software. We also have started something new to us, which are called feedback sessions, where we reach out to our members and we listen to their needs, specifically for new software development. This year, soon, we will have a user meeting where we will hear even more from our community. So with that, I would like to just ask if anyone out there has any questions about the consortium or becoming a member or even possibly converting to software. Maybe we'll start with that. We are monitoring the chat, but we're also kind of looking at the Q&A. So if you're not familiar with Zoom webinars, you can just at the bottom of your Zoom application, you'll see a Q&A, and you can just click that and it will open up the question and answer session, and you can type whatever you would like in there. We're open to anything. It doesn't have to be about membership. It could be about software capabilities or kind of future projects even. Okay. So we have a few.
The other option is attendees. If you're interested, you can raise your hand in the participant list, and we can provide you with the access to be able to talk.
Okay.
If you're interested in talking directly with the Specify folks, just put your hand up in the participant list, and I can give you access to be able to talk.
That's excellent. Thank you, Andy. Well, let's start with some that have been typed in. Do you have plans and a desire to move completely over to Specify 7? Thank you, Ben Norton. Ben is actually, I have to put in a plug for him. He is the chair of our technical advisory committee, and we're very grateful for his support. Absolutely. We do have plans. Jim Beach, do you want to answer that, or would you like me to?
Yeah, sure, I can. Thanks. Yeah, we're definitely focusing on 7 for all of our future innovation. We have the usual problem of supporting a legacy system, a specify 6 in our case, which is the vast majority of our membership base still uses specify 6, and it's still the most complete and mature platform. So I don't see support going away from 6 maintenance support anytime in the foreseeable future. I keep repeating the story of there still being some Muse users out there, even though the last update to Muse was in the late 80s, early 90s. And so I think Specify 6 is going to be around for a while, but we're struggling not to prioritize innovations there and put all of our new stuff into 7. And we've got a priority list for 7 we could talk about later, but that's the plan. So will it take 5 years? I don't know. But eventually, 7 will be our main platform. It probably depends on how much grant support we can get in the near term to accelerate the conversion process. We've been working on it for the 7. We've been working on 7 for several years now, and just with 2 programmers on the project, we just don't have enough horsepower to go as quickly as we would like. So we're going to have to find some additional resources to accelerate our 7 backfill of specify 6 features, and trying to be a little bit smarter from the lessons we learned in 6 about not over engineering things that are not heavily used, right? So that we don't create a maintenance backlog for features that are not really that useful. So we're trying to think, for example, smartly about the permissions and access system. We have a very finely resolved system for that in 6. We might not need that level of sophistication in 7 for restricting access to particular tables or functions. We might be able to generalize that a little bit, but still maintain several user categories and a more robust authentication mechanism.
Right. Thank you, Jim. We have a question from Dirk Newman. The various examples of the presenters had a very close fit on accessioning and documentation of stored collection objects. Additional management requirements, such as archiving various sorts of permits and linking those to respective specimen entries, or filing terms and conditions of material transfer agreements for DNA and tissue collections to third parties becomes more and more important. How is this addressed? I guess what I've heard from many of our users is that they use the attachments capability, and you can attach to various tables. It doesn't have to be just the collection object. It can be in the accession. It can be in the locality. Trace it as material sampling, have an attachment. If not, I want to say it, just a shout out, when we hear of various needs throughout the community, we do react, especially if we're hearing it from quite a few people within the community. In fact, if you think back to Robin's talk about barcodes, we've actually changed the way that we do loans so that in future software releases, you will be able to actually use the barcode that's on the preparation or the barcode that is on the collection object, depending on how you are set up. So I guess what I'm saying is that if for DNA we need to make attachments available to a different table, please let us know. We're happy to discuss it, especially with our community at this time. Okay, Theresa, sorry.
And material sample doesn't have attachments, but DNA sequences does. So you can attach anything there.
Okay, so
and we do have a permit table that's linked to a few different tables as well that you can use. Sorry.
One of the other things that we did also recently do, Dirk, is we added all of the GGBN functionality into Specify. We added all of the tables to be able to accommodate the GGBN extensions to Darwin Core. And so you can now port all of that information out from your collection to the aggregators. There is also a formal accessioning process in Specify. All of the accession tables are there that are linked to permits and repository agreements, etc. And a deaccessioning system will shortly be coming in as well, where you can then link accessions and deaccessions to collection objects and make all of that happen as well.
And Dirk raised his hand. How do I find him too? I was going to unmute him. How do I find him to unmute him so he can ask his question?
Should be unmuted.
Here he is.
Now. Yeah, usually permits are stored and archived quite differently in institutions. Usually that is done in the administration. And the challenge there is to link these different archiving systems into collection databases. So there are different ways to do that. But usually these permits, and especially if these are contracts, they are not stored within different departments or sections where the specimens are stored. And so there is an additional step required to bring those two different systems together. And also if you send the material out and have material transfer agreements, you need to do some documentation, so internal documentation that shouldn't go out. For example, collections in Europe under EU law have a documenting obligation for 20 years. Of course, you would like to document that longer, but you need to be able to trace internally whom you did pass which samples along.
So that's all doable within the specified data model. So one of the things that you can do with the security system within Specify is you can provide access to the accession tables to your registrar so that they can be able to get into the database and perform all of those registrar functions for you and be able to handle all of the accessioning and deaccessioning, all of the legal process that happens in your collection. You know, and you can share however much or however little you want to from your collection to the outside world. So you can have a lot of internal processes that are not shared with the outside world in order to be able to handle all of that paperwork that you need to be able to do as part of your EU procedures. And you know, the same is true of the loan and gift system within Specify. It'll track all of those requirements as to who you've sent samples to, when they were sent, what paperwork is associated with it, all of the material transfer agreements, all of that sort of stuff can be handled within Specify. Deb, you had your hand up if you wanted to talk.
Oh, I did. I was curious about this long-term relationship between software development projects. And one example, of course, would be Specify and Symbiota. So if we think, I don't expect there to be an answer or Specify to have all the answers. I'm just really asking an open question to everyone. So if you were to think where we are 20 years from now, do people really imagine that there's like one collection management system and that everybody would be in it, or that we need to be thinking strategically about making connections through time and working with other software developers where we can with our vision? So if we're going to develop a certain functionality, is that going to be compatible with another functionality in another system that's related? And the Symbiota example makes an analogy that's easy because that's already a connection that's potentially there in one direction already and partially in the other. So I'm thinking about the long term.
Yeah, thanks for another tough question.
You're welcome.
I think it comes down to economics. I think in the future, the U.S. community and the global community and the various national communities that are supporting initiatives these initiatives will sort of live or die based on funding and sort of support for cyber infrastructure. So that you know, whether there's 1 or 3 or 5 or 10, or how many options, you know, institutions have will depend on what the funding model looks like. I think in our country, you know, NSF has traditionally funded infrastructure as competitive research awards, and that has its pros and its cons. You know, that everybody likes the anonymous review system and the fairness of that. But at the same time, you know, we pit infrastructure projects against one another. And so it's kind of a countervailing force for any kind of collaboration when we're competing with each other for the same pot of money. So I think, you know, moving the Specify Consortium from a grant funded model to a community funded model helps a little bit get us out of that need to compete and to, you know, outdo or outvision the other competing projects that are going after the same funds. Not that we don't miss those funds; those were very nice to have. Those grants were very nice to have. But I think, you know, most people are envisioning, as far as the data community goes, they're envisioning a global data community, right? With some centralization of data, like with aggregators, and some distribution of data. So there'll be distributed data services that might deal with updates and usage metadata and integration at that level through APIs that would allow multiple platforms to thrive and persist, again, based on their financial resources. And in turn, you know, whether there's pressure to congeal capabilities and come up with a single sort of but broad set of workflows that everything would support, you know, depends on sort of financial health of those projects. I think eventually, my own blue sky thinking here is that eventually the networks will be fast enough and everywhere to the point where we might have a single database for every single collection object in the world. That would be also simultaneously a management system, not just an aggregator. But it seems like if you look at the trends of computing, you know, from when PCs first came out, we started getting access to these technologies very inexpensively. You know, the trend ever since, starting with Gopher and Waze and the World Wide Web, and now much more sophisticated ways of integration. You know, we're just going to greater and greater integration on larger geographic scales with the data. You know, the systems that people need locally, whether they're cloud-based or local, you know, still need support and training and bug fixes and, you know, and software engineering. And I think that dimension, the software dimension, as opposed to the data dimension, is more dependent on economics than it is on this, you know, sort of unstoppable pattern that we see to merge the data.
I think Randy had a good point about we want to be able to have different, Randy Singer had a good point about having different competing ideas out there. You don't want a monopoly, you want people out there giving different options, which I think is core to, I don't think there will be a single system in the future because different people want different things, which is one of the reasons why people would use, say, Arctos versus Specify. Is there's some people who want to put everything in one place and have everybody have access to it and have everybody be able to see it and use the same standards. And then there's other people who want control over their data and say, this is what I want to collect. I don't want other people to be able to tell me what I can collect. This is my data. This is how I want to manage it. So there's different priorities for the people using the software. So there's going to be different software that's provided.
I think that's a good, that kind of summarizes the philosophy behind Arctos and Specify. That's a good comparison, Theresa. I also think it's interesting that sometimes Specify will have capabilities that that unfortunately people don't use or don't realize are there. until they hear about someone else doing it in another software system. For instance, the narratives in EMU that Randy brought up, we have conservation event as a table, and we just need to add it to your database, and you can start capturing that information as well.
We need to be better about tooting our own horn, because we have a lot.
Yes, we do. We need. That's exactly it.
Years, and we stopped supporting because nobody uses it, and then another system gets it. Everyone's asking us why we don't have it. We just didn't have it. We just didn't tell people we had it. That was our fault.
Right. Or the workbench that you could take into the field with you to clean your data there, right? We didn't hear that it was valued and stopped supporting it, and now we're getting requests for something like that. We're trying to ask questions live and also type answers. And I know, Andy, let me know, were we supposed to end at 9:20? I know there's a 10-minute break.
No, there's 5 minutes allowed to switch over, so you should be okay for a couple more minutes.
Okay. We've had some questions about joining the consortium, what it takes. Please email me, Norine at specifysoftware.org. I would be happy to go into more detail than I can probably do here. Please reach out. There's questions about hearing more about version 6 versus version 7, and this is not the first time we've heard that. We know we are kind of working internally on figuring out kind of how to make more information about that available, especially as we're working on both of those for new features. So please know that we are working on that. There was another question about the forum and how often we go in and answer it, and we do. Our goal with the forum was really for it to help build the community, and we realize that it's not being used. We try to give the questions a few days and then go in and answer them ourselves. We would love to invite more people to be part of that forum. We've heard some feedback about things that our users and our members would like to change. And so we're currently internally, again, we are investigating other forum software. So look for a new forum in our future, and hopefully you'll find it a little more intuitive or usable. Tracy, do you see something
I accidentally marked Megan, I think McCullen's question as answered, but I was going to type it out since we're out of time. But she asked about updates and if we're planning on updating. We update constantly. We're constantly working on updates for 6 and for 7. We do focus or try to focus on 7 when we're thinking about new functionality. We tend to focus on adding that functionality to 7 rather than 6, but we're constantly updating. iReports is updated in 7. Or we use different things in 7. She specifically asked about iReports. I'm not sure what the plan is for 6. I think there's a lot of technical hangups for that. But yes, constantly updating. If there's a feature you are interested in, contact us at support@specifysoftware.org, and we can add it to a list. Like I said, we're very responsive for what our users want. So if users are asking for something like agent merging, it's going to make it on the priority list.
And now that we're a consortium, we really take those suggestions to our members, and they have a lot more authority now in those areas. So, and we have on our website the representatives. So your representatives are there. Feel free to reach out to them as well.
I think we're out of time.
Yes, with that, I do believe we're out of time. Again, please feel free to email us, Norine, Norine, at specifysoftware.org. Tracy, you can reach through support@specifysoftware.org. And thank you so much, everyone, for attending our symposium and our Q&A. All right.